They say the Lord don't give a soul more than it can carry, but I reckon he ain't never met Clara Wren. I remember the snap of her fingers clearer than any hymn. Sharp, fast, cruel. That snap meant I was to stop breathing and start running, wherever she pointed. Most days it was toward pain. Other days it was toward shame. That night it was both. The tin cup had a hairline crack down its side, barely visible. But that didn't matter to Clara. She lifted it with her bony hand and held it up like it was a murder weapon I'd forged myself. "This you're doing, girl?" she hissed through yellow teeth. I didn't answer. I never did. Answers just made her madder. Silence might buy me mercy. Oh, that was a rare currency in that house. Her slap came so fast my cheek stung before the sound caught up. "You think you're too good to drink from the rain barrel, now you're breaking dishes too?" She turned to the guests, 3 church ladies from the Sunday school who were there for tea and gossip. "Lazy little mongrel, can't even keep from breaking what little we got." The ladies chuckled politely, but they looked away. They always did. They saw the bruises but never spoke on them. Maybe they figured I deserved them. Maybe they were scared of her too. That night she told me I was banished from supper. Not the first time, wouldn't be the last. Said I was too much mouth and too little work. Called me a ghost she wished had never shown up. I sat out back on the step, knees hugged tight, stomach howling. The moon was pale and high. I counted the stars like they were seconds. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the ache in my belly and the old fury in my bones. I remembered Mama once saying I was born in a storm. Lightning struck the oak tree outside the window and split it in half the same minute I came hollering into this world. "Girl's got fire in her," she'd whispered before the sickness took her. Clara snuffed that fire out daily, but maybe there was still a spark somewhere, because that night I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I just stood up. No shoes, no coat, no plan. Just the cracked cup of my soul and a spine stiff enough to carry it. I walked away from the house. The screen door creaked behind me as I passed it, and I swear I heard Clara yell something, maybe my name, maybe a curse, that I didn't turn back. The frost bit my bare feet as I crossed the field. The barn stood like a silhouette of something that once offered safety. I didn't stop there either. I kept walking. Over the dry creek bed, past the burned-out fence posts, into the night like a moth dumb enough to chase the stars. Every step I took away from that house hurt, not because of the thorns or cold or hunger, but because I wasn't sure I deserved anything better. But deep down, I think I was daring the world to show me different. I made it through the first night by curling up under a fallen log, wrapped in damp leaves and the kind of exhaustion that buries dreams before they start. I don't remember sleep, just shaking, from cold, from fear, from the 1,000 voices in my head repeating Clara's words like scripture. Come morning, my feet were raw and bleeding, my dress stiff with dirt and old tears. My stomach had moved past hunger into something quieter, more dangerous. It no longer begged, just waited. I walked south, mostly because the wind came from the north and I couldn't bear to face it. Somewhere along that path, no more than a rutted deer trail, I saw a smoke column rising past the tree line. I told myself I'd just pass by, maybe steal a crust of bread from a windowsill if the Lord was feeling kind. Maybe die trying. Either option felt honest. But when I came upon the fence line, I stopped dead. It wasn't a grand place, just a modest homestead set between two rolling hills, nestled like it had something to hide. A few chickens pecked the earth near the coop. A plow leaned against the barn, and the roof bore more patches than shingles. Still, it looked like heaven to me. A man stood out front chopping wood. Mid-40s, I guess, though his face bore the kind of wear life don't count in years. He saw me the second I reached the gate, and I froze like a cornered rabbit. He didn't speak, just laying the axe down real slow and stepped toward me. Not like a man chasing off a thief, but like someone meeting a storm halfway. "You all right, miss?" he asked, voice low and calm. I tried to nod, but my knees buckled instead. He caught me before I hit the dirt. Next thing I remembered, I was seated at a kitchen table, steam rising from a chipped bowl of stew. 3 kids peeked at me from the hallway. 2 boys and a girl, none older than 10. I must have looked like a ghost to them. I felt like one. The man brought me water and said his name was Rhett Mallory. He didn't ask mine, didn't push me to speak. He just sat across from me and said, "Eat." I stared at the bowl. My hands hovered over it like it might vanish. Then I picked up the spoon and brought it to my mouth. First bite scalded my tongue. Second one burned my throat. Third one broke me. I cried, loud and ugly, right into that stew. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Because I hadn't known food could taste like safety. Rhett said nothing, just refilled my bowl when I emptied it. Later, as dusk came crawling in, he asked if I had a place to go. I shook my head. He nodded like that was answer enough. "Stay the night. You can sleep in the loft. Ain't much, but it's dry and warm." I wanted to refuse, to run. My body didn't trust kindness, and my heart didn't trust anything at all. But my mouth said something different. "Thank you." Just 2 words, but it felt like breathing for the first time in years. That night, under a threadbare quilt and a roof that didn't leak, I stared at the rafters and listened to the quiet sounds of a home that didn't hate me. For the first time since Mama died, I didn't pray for the morning to come. I just let it. Rhett didn't ask me anything the next morning. Not where I came from, not what happened, not why I flinched every time the floorboards creaked. He just handed me a plate of cornmeal biscuits and said, "Eat slow this time. Don't want you getting sick." I did as he said, not out of obedience. I'd had my fill of that under Claris rule. But because he said it without threat, without wheat, like it was a favor he was doing me, not a test. The kids watched from a distance at first. The youngest, Sam, brought me a blue marble from his coat pocket and rolled it across the table. I think that was his way of saying hello. I rolled it back. From then on, we were allies. By week's end, I'd found a rhythm. Rhett never told me to work, but I started helping with the chores, gathering eggs, sweeping the porch, mending what could be mended. It felt strange at first, doing things without fear of punishment. Back at Clara's, work was either never enough or done wrong on purpose, according to her anyway. Here, it was just part of life. One evening, Rhett stood beside me on the porch, looking out across the pasture. "You've got a good hand with them chickens," he said. I shrugged. "They don't hit back." He nodded like he understood more than I'd said. Then he added, "You can stay as long as you need." I wanted to ask him what he expected in return, but I didn't. I just stared out into the tall grass and let the words settle like warm ash. That night, I helped Ellie, Rhett's daughter, patch a tear in her dress. She told me I made her braids look nicer than her daddy did. I smiled without meaning to. It was the first time my lips had remembered how. But peace is a fragile thing. It don't take much to crack it, and the first crack came by way of a preacher's wife. Mrs. Tilden showed up with a pie in hand and gossip on her tongue. She didn't recognize me at first. I was clean now, face fuller, hands steadier. But when she finally placed me, her mouth puckered like she'd bitten into something sour. "Why, that's Clara Wren's stepdaughter, isn't it?" she whispered loud enough for the hens to hear. "Ran off in the night, some say. Stole things, others reckon." Rhett's jaw tightened, but he didn't correct her. He just thanked her for the pie and showed her out. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow felt like Clara's long arm reaching west, every creak like her coming to drag me back. Rhett found me outside before sunrise, splitting kindling like it was a punishment. "Mrs. Tilden's got a tongue longer than a well rope," he said. "Don't give it more weight than it's due." I said, "She'll tell others. They'll come." "Then let 'em." That stopped me. He looked me square in the eye like he was weighing my soul against the truth. "You're not a stray dog, June. You're a person. You got the right to live and breathe and work and be safe. That's all there is to it." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was too tight. Instead, I picked up the next log and split it clean through. Maybe it was the work. Maybe it was the sunrise painting the barn gold. Maybe it was just hope peeking in for the first time in years. But I felt something I hadn't in a long while. Belonging.
I was feeding the hens when I saw the dust rise down the road, thick and slow like a warning. I knew that wagon before I saw who sat in it, knew the creak of its axle, the rusted brass latch on the trunk lashed to the back. Clara Wren. She always traveled like a storm, sudden and choking, all noise and mess and ruin. But this time she didn't come alone. A deputy rode beside her, stiff in the saddle, eyes darting like he didn't much care to be there. He wore the badge, sure, but his fingers tapped nervous against his holster. Rhett stepped out from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't glance at me, just nodded once, slow. It was his way of saying, "Stay steady." Clara climbed down like she owned the land. Her dress was crisp, her hair twisted up tight, same coils that used to snake around her fingers when she grabbed me by the roots. She looked around with a sneer, like the place offended her. "You've taken what ain't yours, Mr. Mallory. I'm here for my ward." I stepped forward, heart punching against my ribs. "I ain't your anything." She snapped her head toward me like a whip. "You watch that mouth, girl. I took you in out of charity, and you repay me by running off and spreading filth about my name." The deputy cleared his throat. "Ma'am says she's the girl's guardian. Legally, we gotta take her back." "I'm nearly 17, I said, surprising even myself with how steady it came out. "Old enough to say no." She scoffed. "You think anyone's going to believe the lies you tell after the things you've done? You're a filthy, thieving little snake, and everyone in town knows it. This man's harboring you like some stray mutt." Rhett spoke then, quiet, firm. "She ain't a mutt, and she ain't yours." The deputy looked between us, eyes narrowing. "Ain't no papers proving anything here, just one voice against another." "That so?" came another voice behind us. Pastor Thorne stepped from around the barn, hat in hand. "Funny thing, I've heard both voices in that house. One screams, one bleeds." Clara's mouth went thin. She turned back to the deputy. "I demand she be returned." "I ain't going. Not now, not ever." My hands were shaking, but I made myself stand tall. I stared right into her, all the way back to that room where Mama died, to every bruise hidden under my sleeves, every hunger pang and every slap and insult and cold night on the floor. The deputy rubbed his chin. "As far as I can tell, she's not a minor anymore, and she's willing to stay here. Ain't nothing I can do." Clara went pale, then red. Her voice twisted like rusted metal. "This ain't over." She climbed back into that wagon with all the grace of a vulture retreating from a lion. The deputy tipped his hat awkwardly, then followed her down the road. I didn't move until the dust settled. Then I collapsed to my knees in the dirt, shaking with something that wasn't fear. Rhett knelt beside me and put a hand on my back. "You done good." "No," I whispered. "I done right." The kids came out from hiding, eyes wide. Ellie hugged me without a word. That night we ate dinner with an extra plate set on the table. Rhett's doing. He said, "For the space she used to take, let it be filled with peace instead." I didn't speak much, but I watched the firelight dance on the wall and felt something shift. It wasn't just that Clara left. It was that I told her to.
It didn't take long for Clara to strike back. Her pride had been wounded in front of townsfolk, a deeper injury to her than any loss of custody, and Clara Rand never left a wound unavenged. We got word from the general store 3 days later. Judge Larkin had been talking with Clara, loudly. Something about legal obligations, fraud, and harboring a runaway. The kind of talk that draws ears. 2 nights after that, the real trouble showed up. It was just past dark when Rhett came into the cabin and said one word: Kane. I didn't know the name, but Rhett's voice told me enough. He bolted the door. Sam and Allie were ushered into the cellar. I grabbed the rifle from the mantel, though I'd never fired it. My hands were sweating. Kane, Everett Kane, was Clara's second cousin by marriage and a known hound for hire. Not a lawman, not officially, but he wore the look, tall, iron-eyed, leather coat flapping like wings. He came with 2 men in a wagon marked with the judge's seal, all forged, Pastor Thorne had warned us. I watched him from the loft window. Kane dismounted and knocked once, twice, slow as a death toll. "You got 30 seconds to bring the girl out," he shouted, voice flat, "or we come in and take her." Rhett didn't answer. "Don't make me drag those children into this," Kane added. Rhett's face hardened and he turned to me. "Back door, now." We fled out the rear, through the grove and into the trees. Pastor Thorne was waiting with 2 horses and a shotgun slung over his shoulder. We rode into the wild, no destination, just a way. We camped by the creek, cold and scared, while Rhett and Thorne took turns keeping watch. "I'm sorry," I whispered that night as we sat around the fire, flames licking the darkness. Rhett looked at me, steady and unflinching. "June, you're not a burden. You're family. That means we fight for you. Not because we have to, because we want to." I turned away, blinking hard. I wasn't used to being wanted, not like that. But hiding wasn't a life, and I knew Clara wouldn't stop. Judge Larkin had given her just enough legal thread to strangle me with. "We can't run forever," I said. "We won't," Pastor Thorne replied. "Tomorrow, we stop running." By dawn, we rode back. Kane and his men were still camped near the barn. They hadn't expected our return.
Thorne led the way, shotgun raised. "You boys got any legal writs? Hand 'em over," he called. "If not, you're trespassing." Kane laughed. "You think a preacher's word scares me?" "No," Rhett said, stepping beside him, rifle aimed, "but buckshot might." A tense silence. Then Kane's eyes shifted. His men hesitated. One dropped his reins. Kane spat in the dirt. "This ain't over." "You keep saying that," I said, stepping forward, "but every time you come back, you find me stronger." He looked at me like a snake learning to walk upright. Then he turned and mounted up. We watched them leave. When it was over, Rhett turned to me and said, "Time to make this official." "Official?" "You're going to sign your name next to mine on paper. You'll belong here in every way that matters." My throat tightened. I nodded. I'd run far from the house of hurt. Now it was time to build something better.
The day I signed my name, the sky was gunmetal gray and full of warning. Not rain, not storm, just the kind of heavy quiet that made even the chickens act skittish. We rode into town together. Rhett, Pastor Thorne, the children, and me. I wore a clean dress Ellie had outgrown and boots too big by size, stuffed with cloth to keep 'em from slipping. My hair was plaited meat, my chin lifted just enough to make Clara Wren roll over in her smug little grave, if she'd had one yet. Inside the registrar's office, a clerk named Miss Daly watched me with mild curiosity. Her spectacles sat low on her nose. "You sure you understand what this means?" she asked gently. "Signing this binds you to the Mallory household. You'll be considered family under law, legal wardship, all rights and protections thereof." I looked at Rhett. He nodded once. "I know what it means," I said. She slid the paper forward. "Then write your name clear." The quill trembled in my grip. I hadn't written much beyond scraps, notes, chores, the occasional line copied from a Bible verse. But I scrawled it all the same. June Mercy Whitlow Mallory. I added the Mallory part without thinking. Didn't ask Rhett's permission. Didn't need it. Pastor Thorne smiled like he'd seen the sun rise for the first time in a week. Rhett squeezed my shoulder. "It's yours now, June, all of it." But peace don't settle easy when the law's been bought. 3 days later, a marshal arrived, not local, but brought in special from Cooper's Hollow. Wore a polished badge and carried a letter with Judge Larkin's seal, demanding my presence in court. "You're accused of false representation, forgery, fraud, illegal habitation. These are serious charges." "Is that so?" Pastor Thorne said, stepping forward, legal book in hand. "Because here's a duly signed wardship, a pastor's witness statement, and a sworn affidavit from the registrar's office. You want to dance in court? We'll bring music." Still, the marshal wouldn't back down. "Judge Larkin himself will hear the case. I suggest you prepare." I was scared, not of truth, but how often it didn't matter. The court could twist words, ignore bruises, erase what didn't suit the powerful. Clara always said the law was a man's game, and I was just a poor girl with calloused hands and no name worth defending. But she was wrong. I had a name now. I'd signed it myself. That night, as we sat by the fire, Sam crawled into my lap and asked, "Are you going to leave?" "No," I said, "not unless they drag me." Ellie piped up, "Then we'll bite their ankles." Rhett chuckled, then grew serious. "Whatever happens, June, you're one of us now. No judge can change that." He pulled a worn ledger from the shelf. The family book where births, deaths, and vows were recorded. The kind of book every house used to keep, sacred as scripture. He opened to the first blank page and handed me the pen again. Sign here too. Make it real for good. I did. The ink bled into the page like a wound closing. From that moment on, I wasn't just someone who survived. I was someone who stayed.
We stepped into that courthouse like soldiers headed to war. The pews creaked with the weight of curious townsfolk. Folks who once looked past my bruises now watched me with popcorn eyes and folded arms, as if my pain had become a play for their amusement. Judge Larkin sat at the bench, high and smug, fingers steepled like he was already bored. Clara Wren stood beside her lawyer, Everett King, looking freshly scrubbed and mockingly pious in a borrowed suit. Rhett's jaw clenched beside me. Pastor Thorne, sitting on my other side, gave my hand a squeeze. He'd told me before we came, let him hang themselves with their own rope. And they did try. Clara took the stand with crocodile tears ready, weaving a tale of a poor, troubled girl, me, who'd run from home after stealing money, lying about abuse, and seducing a lonely widower for shelter. "She's manipulating him, Your Honor," she said, voice quivering just right. "I only ever wanted to raise her right as my late husband wished, but she's a wild thing, vindictive, dangerous." I nearly laughed. Dangerous. That word had followed me my whole life, whispered by folks who mistook my silence for threat, my pain for mischief. Rhett stood up and gave his testimony, calm, measured, said I never stole a thing, said he found me half dead and never once regretted taking me in. But the room didn't really shift until I stood. Larkin barely looked up. "You may speak." So I did. "My mother died when I was 7. My stepmother raised me with fists and fury. I wasn't a daughter. I was a mouth to feed and a thing to punish. I learned to read from the back of feed sacks, learned to sew by patching my own bloodied sleeves, learned quiet because crying made it worse." I paused. The room was pin-drop still. I never asked for Rhett's help. I didn't know what kindness looked like till I walked through his door and he didn't flinch at the sight of me. His children gave me more love in 1 week than Clara did in a decade. Clara rose to object, but Larkin waved her off. I turned to the judge. "You can twist the law however you like, but I've signed my name. I've bled for that family. I've worked that land. I've held their children when they cried and buried their dog when it died. That's more than legal. That's home." Larkin finally looked me in the eye. "You're underage," he said coldly, "but only just." He shuffled some papers, feigned thought, then finally, with a voice like gravel sliding downhill, "Court recognizes June Whitlow Mallory as legal ward of the Mallory household. The accusations of fraud and misconduct are dismissed." Clara gasped like she'd been slapped. Kane stared holes through me, but I didn't care. I exhaled and it felt like fire leaving my lungs. Outside the courthouse, Rhett wrapped me in a hug before I even reached the steps. "You did it," he said. "No," I whispered, smiling. "We did." The sun was high and gold.
I was free. Not just from Clara, from silence, from shame, from the ghost of the girl I used to be.
The seasons turn like pages, each one softer than the last. Spring brought bloom to the pasture and laughter to the porch. I learned to bake without burning the crust, to ride bareback without falling off, to speak without looking over my shoulder. Ellie taught me how to whistle with my fingers. Sam taught me how to lose a marble with dignity. And Rhett, well, he taught me how to be still, how to sit in a quiet evening and let peace settle like dust. But the biggest change came one morning in the form of an envelope. It was cream-colored, sealed in wax, addressed to Miss June Whitlow Mallory. The sight of my name, mine, printed in ink, nearly brought me to my knees. Inside was a letter. A woman from out east, a publisher's wife, had heard about the courtroom trial through a cousin of a cousin. She'd read a newspaper's account, crude and incomplete, but something in it stuck with her. "If your story is true," the letter read, "you ought to put it to paper. There are more girls like you than the world wants to admit." I held the letter in trembling hands. That night, I pulled out Rhett's old ledger, the one where I'd written my name next to his, and turned to a blank page. Then another. Then another. Words poured out, raw and clumsy, but real. I wrote about the cracked tin cup, the cold porch, the stew that made me cry, the firelight on the cabin walls, the courtroom, the sound of a name that finally fit. Some nights I wrote until my candle burned to a nub. Rhett would find me slumped over the pages and cover me with a quilt before heading back to bed. Then, one dusk, a knock came at the door. It was a girl. Couldn't have been more than 12, hair in knots, lips blue from cold. Her eyes were wide and hollow in that way I knew too well. Behind her stood a horse tied loose, saddled too high. A stolen ride, no doubt. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I stepped aside, held the door open. She hesitated, looking behind her as if expecting someone to snatch her back into darkness. "It's all right," I said. "You're safe." She stepped in. Ellie brought her a blanket. Sam offered a biscuit. Rhett poured warm milk without asking a single question. That night, I added a new page to the ledger. I didn't know her name yet. Didn't need to. What mattered was this: she had a place, just like I did. I finished my manuscript 2 weeks later, tied the pages in twine, sent 'em east. Maybe nothing would come of it. Maybe the world wasn't ready. But I was. Because my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every girl who'd been silenced, starved, cast aside. And now, finally, someone was listening.